There could be big changes coming our way. Congress has introduced several bills that could impact your pay, benefits, and even where you work. If you're wondering how these proposals could impact your career, retirement, your telework status, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. A new Congress was seated on January 3rd, 2025. With a narrow Republican majority in both the House and the Senate, and a Republican president sitting in the White House, a lot of these changes could have more momentum. They could actually come into fruition. Let's start with the first one, which is making a lot of noise, and that's telework. Telework, once seen as the future of work, is under fire. President Trump has made it clear that he wants all federal employees to come back into the office. He stated if they don't return, they're going to be dismissed. So Congress has introduced multiple bills again to align with this stance. We have the Return to Work Act, H.R. 107, which requires agencies to roll back their telework policies to pre-2020 standards, which I think most people would be totally fine with. Because a lot of federal agencies, they allowed their employees to work from home 2 or 3 days out of the week, depending on the agency, depending on your leadership. So a lot of people have this belief that people were not working from home before the pandemic, and that's completely not true. The same goes for 100% remote work. A lot of people were working 100% remote, and I mean thousands of them, before the pandemic ever arrived. And right now, even after the pandemic, today, there's more people that are working in the office than the start of the pandemic. In 2020, the share of eligible federal employees who teleworked increased from 56% to 90%. And currently, today, there's about half of the federal workforce that are able to work from home. So we're already at pre-pandemic levels. Then we have the Remote Act, S21. This is the one that introduces the strict oversight when it comes to telework or remote work. So the way it would work in theory is the agency would be monitoring your productivity level. When do you log in? How often are you actually striking the keys? They would compare that to the employees that are in the cubicle, that are in the office, and they would see how productive you are compared to your peers. Are you the same with productivity? Are you more productive or less productive? That information would be reported to Congress. That information would come out in a publicly released report. That's what this act is all about. But a lot of this is politics. Republicans do not like when workers work from home. There's a few reasons why. First, the idea of a worker working without a boss nearby, without supervision, that really irks them because they feel that human nature is to exploit the company or the federal agency to just do the least amount of work, to not be motivated, to eat chips and watch Netflix all day. They feel that's human conditioning. That's how human beings are going to react. And that's why they need to be in the office. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting taxpayer money. The government's going to be moving slower and the rest of it. The second thing is spending money. They want people to spend money on businesses, on services, on products. If you're going into an office, you have a higher probability. Well, first off, you're getting gas, right? You're stimulating that gas station. You're buying maybe some chips, a pack of gum, whatever it is. So the gas station benefits, the dry cleaner benefits, the bus or the metro system or whatever it is. Maybe you're taking an Uber. Maybe you have to buy a new car. So the money, you're spending more as an individual, as a consumer. And then when you're at work, maybe you're buying a Subway sandwich or whatever the case is. So they like that concept of you actually spending. And then there's the idea of discipline, hard work, teamwork. You need to have the team. You hear so much of that, right? We need to collaborate as a team. You can't do that sitting at home on your couch. Next, let's talk dollars and cents. Locality pay is a lifeline for a lot of people that live and work in high-cost areas. So in DC, in order to make it, depending on your situation, I would say you have to be a GS-14 or a GS-15. The concept, the idea of me of a GS-9 or a GS-11 trying to make it in DC, that individual is probably living below the line of poverty because that's how expensive things are here. And the same could be said for San Francisco and a lot of metropolitan areas. You need a higher salary. And from the government's perspective, they're not able to attract talent if they don't pay at least a livable wage. Take this for an example. The current average locality pay for DC is 33% over the base salary. So under the new proposal, the way that locality pay would work is it would be based on your zip code and not your actual place of duty. So there are so many people right now that commute to Washington, D.C. They might live in West Virginia or Pennsylvania, but they're willing to drive 2.5, 3 hours in order to come in a couple of times a week. So they're getting DC locality pay, but they live in a different state. Now, to me, this seems reasonable. If you're living in a low-cost area, I understand why your locality should match where you live. Even though you might be spending in the DC area, especially for lunch and maybe for some other services, you might be spending, but most of your spending would be happening at where your zip code is, where you're actually living. But the more alarming part about this is another aspect of the change to locality pay is there's a proposal, it's kind of radical, a proposal to eliminate it from the pension. The pension right now includes locality pay. And because it includes locality pay, a lot of people see higher pensions when they retire. So here's how that could play out. A GS-12's high 3 salary with locality pay could be $110,000 a year. A high 3 salary without locality pay could be $90,000 a year. So the impact on pension is a loss of between $400 and $600 per month. Considering the average FERS pension, the average amount you receive a month right now is about $2,100. You could see a 20 to 30% hit on that figure. So to the 1.2 million federal retirees right now, that could potentially be in play. Another way to look at it is perhaps those people who have already retired, they would be grandfathered in, and this would impact people that are retiring in the future. Decentralization is another hot topic. Senator Ernest reintroduced the Drain the Swamp Act and the Swamp Act. These bills aim to remove 30% of the federal workforce and agencies out of DC to the rest of the country, spreading them out to the rest of the country. Now, an example of this was done with the USDA. They were moved to Kansas City, Missouri in 2021. Now, the result is 60% of the people that were part of that agency, they refused to relocate. They just decided to stay in the DC area and look for better jobs. So the employees affected by this reorganization, they were not offered any relocation incentive, and they were also given 90 days to move. The Washington, D.C. locality rate is one of the highest at 33%. Now compare that to 18% in Kansas City. That's a pay cut of around $15,000 a year. So you keep your GS grade and your step level, but if you're moving to another area and their locality pay is lower, you will be taking a pay decrease. I speak to a lot of people that live in California and they want to relocate to, let's say, Texas. Even though they're a GS-12 Step 5 in Los Angeles, California, you're still taking a pay cut if you come to Dallas because the locality pay cannot be matched. They're matching you on grade and step only. Next, have you ever heard of pay for performance? This is another act. It's called the Federal Employee Performance and Accountability Act. This introduces a tiered salary system. It rewards the top performers and it penalizes others. Take a look at how this could look like. We could have Tier 1 exceeds expectations, up to 10% raise and bonus. Tier 2 meets expectation, no change in pay. Tier 3, below expectations, 10% pay cut plus mandatory training. Sounds fair, right? But the problem with it is that performance rankings are often subjective. It comes down to personality. It comes down to how well do you get along? Do you interact? How well do you like an individual? On some level, that seeps into the performance appraisal. And what if the system ends up being like some of the OERs in the military where they force you to put people at the bottom, where you're a supervisor and let's say you supervise 15 people and you're forced to pick 1 or 2 people to be at the bottom. Now that changes everything because you're impacting a person's livelihood. Then we have workforce reductions. The Federal Freeze Act, that would propose freezing all pay for at least a year as if our buying power hasn't already been reduced enough. And then they want to cap the workforce for 3 years. And the goal behind that is simple. It's just to reduce the total size of the government. The current federal workforce is around 2.2 million employees. The proposed reduction is up to 10% over 3 years. That could be a total of up to 500,000 government jobs completely vanishing and disappearing over a 3-year time period. But there are some positions that will probably be exempt from this. And we're looking at positions dealing with national security, law enforcement, and also public health roles. So why should you care? A lot of people will look at this and say, well, this is just being proposed. This is not a law yet. This will never pass. Well, it has a higher probability of passing with a majority in the House of Republicans, with a majority in the Senate, with a Republican sitting in the White House. It has never had a better chance of passing than it does now. So you have to stay informed. You have to understand what the possibilities are. 1 in 5 federal employees is eligible for retirement by 2026, and 78% of employees, they cite telework as a top factor for job satisfaction. Changes like we just mentioned could lead to an exodus of the federal workforce. And then what we're really talking about is brain drain. We're talking about institutional knowledge being lost. So you've probably been in a situation where you come into an office and you're wondering how to get a process completed, but no one there understands because nobody was around. I'll give you an example. So in a federal agency, let's say OIG is doing an audit of a system, and you're preparing for that audit. You want to make sure you have all the documents. You want to make sure you have everything ready to present. So you're asking people. You can ask OIG. They're going to tell you like a blunt answer. They're not going to really expand upon it. So you're asking people, what was your experience? What happened during the last OIG audit? Everyone in the office is looking at you like, hey, Billy is the guy who handled it last time. Billy is no longer here. He didn't write up a continuity document. We have no idea what to expect. We're starting at ground zero. So that impacts your ability to be able to prepare efficiently in order to answer what OIG's complaints are or what they would like to investigate or whatever the matter is. It's not just with that, it's with pretty much everything. So if you're trying to communicate with another federal agency, you're trying to reach an agreement with a document, maybe there are no steps published on how to do that. It was all institutional knowledge that was not committed to a document yet. It didn't make its way to a SOP. That information could be lost. That would lead to a decrease in efficiency across the federal workforce. Either way you look at it, this year is shaping up to be a very important year if you're a federal employee, if you're a job seeker looking to get into the federal government. If you're still interested in getting a federal government job, you need to know the process from start to finish, from setting up your usajobs.gov account to uploading your resume and actually accepting the job offer. If you're interested in those steps, I want you to check this video out next. If you want to download a federal resume example, check out the links in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.